Recording is on.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Monday, June 7th, 2021, DXbiz gathering at 1500 UTC time. We're coming out of Bitcoin Crypto Miami conference, so some people are a little tired, but it was overall a pretty good, a pretty wild turnout to a city. And lots of interesting people here. So I posted the agenda for today's meeting. I think there's a bunch of different topics today that it's kind of an expansion. There's like a handful of different things happening that are like in general important for us to, I think, talk about that are not specifically like business development opportunities or whatever, but bigger strategy maybe. And I'm thinking about identity, but then also related to like Swapper and stuff too. So I put those on the agenda. Do we have, we'll start with intros if there's anyone new, but I'm not, I don't think, is there?
Yeah, we do.
Great.
Hey everyone, we do have one new contributor introduction today. I would like to welcome Ross. Ross, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please go ahead now. Just let the community know a little bit about yourself, just your area of expertise, maybe a bit about some of your past work, and then how you found out about DXDAO.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Ross. I'm in Scotland in the UK. I've been working for JP Morgan for about 3 and a bit years now as a full stack web developer. Mostly working with React and Node and stuff with a more sort of microservice cloud architecture, my normal work. But I've been interested in crypto for a few years now. And just this year started looking more into development stuff. I was contributing taking part in the 0x Hack hackathon a couple of weeks ago. And Melanie reached out to me about DXDAO. I introduced myself here a couple of weeks ago on the Keybase. And Martin reached out to me about working on Mesa. So I've just been sort of slowly getting my head around how DAOs work, and contributing a wee bit. So I'm just starting my trial period now. So it's nice to be here.
Awesome. Welcome, Ross.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ross. Did you say JP Morgan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So some of us come from the traditional finance world.
Awesome.
I call it the historical finance world a long time ago. But I used to work at JP Morgan as well.
Cool.
A long time ago. Cool. So
there was recently a discussion on Twitter from the sushi team, and then this is not personal, Ross. They just called every banking dev a poor dev. It was really ridiculous how.
I'll put it this way: there's a reason that I'm
envy going on,
looking towards getting into DeFi as opposed to traditional finance. It's certainly a lot more interesting.
Yeah, Ross has been joining our Mesa calls for the past 2 weeks now, and we're really grateful that we have him.
Cool. Well, welcome. So first, I added a section to the agenda, like around different important discussions that might fit into other parts of DXDAO or other calls, but some are kind of immediate, so it would be good to discuss them here. And the first one is around Swapper. We just had a Swapper call, and we were talking about Swapper, like farming deployment, Arbitrum strategy, and Swapper token a little bit. And just we wanted to get everyone on the same page, especially like to tie in with marketing and comms team, because we have quite a few moving parts, and we're also having some problems with Alchemy right now, where it's hard to get a proposal to show up. So that's being worked on, but we're just wanted to talk about strategy. At the same time, there's a handful of other, projects out there that are like, announcing tweets that they've deployed on Arbitrum, and like that doesn't, what does that actually mean, right? So, you know, overall, we think that like DXDAO really leads with like our proposals, right? So we should do more, hopefully once it works, we should do more proposals around our Arbitrum strategy, like maybe a signal proposal, a commitment to funding a certain amount of money onto Arbitrum, like talking about the expansion of DXDAO's products to Arbitrum, including and leading with like our governance, right? We're going to have DXVote there, and that's going to govern the products. Because like comparing to like say Uniswap or another platform that's like launched on Arbitrum, like how are those projects going to govern their protocols on something like Arbitrum? Like I don't know even know if it's known. So DXDAO can really lead with this. I don't know if Zet or John, if you want to give like a little bit of an overview of what we talked about and how we think we should proceed, at least from a communications perspective, or what the ideal thing is to do. And then we can make a little bit of a plan as a follow-up to like, to do that strategy, just so we're not just getting like left behind or ignored from like a publicity point of view, you know?
Yeah, and so deploying on Arbitrum is something that the Swapper Squad has been preparing for, along with the governance deployment of a new base onto Arbitrum. But yeah, I think in general, it's the governance process and consensus, right, that is like setting the direction. And so, yeah, I think it's time for some kind of a proposal kind of indicating DXDAO's intent and strategy for Arbitrum, because it should go live probably in the next month or so. Okay,
so a signal proposal which like has an outline plan with like some kind of commitment or target of funding of capital, moving capital to that base, you know, DX and mentioning specifically DXVote is, you know, could be included in that, but you know, DXVote is still kind of untested, I guess, right? So it's an introduction of a new governance mechanism in tandem with like launching products. But then once those proposals are live, like, do we want to talk about those proposals before they pass? Do we want to talk about those proposals only once they pass? We've had some experience with that, but we don't want to just not let everyone know that DXDAO is coming to Arbitrum. We'd like to get that out there sooner than later, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it makes sense for DXDAO, like media and comms, to try to reflect what is happening in governance, you know. And so like the first, when the proposal is made, I think is interesting, right? To talk about, even if it's not necessarily like you don't know it's going to pass or not, right? They still can be interesting.
Yeah, so to Keenan's point, like when you say like announcing we are deploying, what does that mean? Like, does that only mean?
No, because I think what is actually true is two DXDAO contributors or a couple DXDAO contributors are deploying things to Arbitrum, but DXDAO itself isn't doing anything on Arbitrum until there's some type of proposal or consensus signal from DXDAO. So I think that's what we kind of need there, and that would kind of include it. I guess in terms of timeline, it would probably be good, I think, if we can like aim to, I don't know, have something in the forum and then try to like maybe discuss it on Wednesday's governance call and then try to get a signal proposal after that. I think XDAO would probably be fine because we have authorized that for signaling there, and that would be 5 days. And so we could probably do like a tweet of something about the intentions, maybe like Thursday or Friday this week once the proposal goes live, and that will be discussed maybe in the Discord and like kind of the forum and maybe like the hardcore community, and then we can maybe use that to prepare a Medium post that we're doing like next Monday or Tuesday once the proposal actually goes live or is passed.
Cool. So Keenan and marketing comms team, we should just make sure everyone's connected with the like the swapper, the team that's been focused on swapper, to make sure we have the timing, everything laid out.
And just thinking of that, there's like, I guess what we'd want in that proposal, I think we said like, okay, swapper or DX vote, swapper, and then a commitment of capital. I guess the other things that we could or could not mention are, one, omen on Arbitrum, whether you would want to like make some indication on that, even though that wouldn't be something we're probably acting immediately. And then second would be swapper token. Do we want to like use this signal proposal as an opportunity to kind of tease that? And of course, swapper token has not been approved by governance or by consensus either. But those would be kind of maybe two things we could include or not include, along with the other things.
Okay.
To the question, if we should deploy Omen to Arbitrum, I think we should, primarily for the bus. I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical that once we deploy, everyone will just use Omen on Arbitrum. But I mean, it's mainly deploying contracts and connecting it to the Arbitrum base. So I think it's a low-hanging fruit we should pursue. And I think Hexel is fine with taking the task to deploy Omen on Arbitrum. The main difference there will be that we will not have Claros as an arbitrator. So the Arbitrum base will actually be the arbitrator as the main choice for now.
And maybe a question about like technical, like, do you use a version of the tight integration, or do you just have its own separate version on Arbitrum?
Exactly. Like that's a great point. I think the tight integration will mainly be used for the main base, and the main base of Omen is still XDAI. And until we are not like transitioning away the base, Arbitrum will be a playground, which means no tight integration to Arbitrum.
Okay.
On the product tokens, obviously they're not live or approved yet from the DAO, but I mean, if there's some kind of single proposal to Arbitrum, it could like address it at some level, right? Like product tokens will get used on this base, like like it would be on other bases. Curious what people think on that. Like, yeah.
Oh yeah, and as part of the marketing strategy, if as DX vote, which is deployed on Arbitrum, I believe, as it becomes a thing and it's usable, leading with like the governance, the ability of DXDAO to map governance, the governance base across multiple chains and would then be on Arbitrum, would be the third chain, is something that DXDAO can talk about and lead with that other projects probably can't. And so that's would be great to focus on that as well. Cool. So the next topic is related to, it's something that DXDAO has been talking about in general. The more I think about it, the more I become a little unsure of what DXDAO's mission actually is. And there is a post from Christopher H. in the forum that he posted last week that we have talked just slightly about, which is like, his post was really like turning DXDAO itself into more of an incubator, and once products get going, letting products become really their own thing, their own like teams, and with their own funding, and even maybe raise money. Omen and Swapper are a little unique for that because they were really core, built by like from the start of DXDAO's core team. So they are already highly connected to DXDAO and DXD token. So spinning them out is a little bit different than a new project coming in today that has its team and it gets incubated by the DAO and things like that. So there's things for discussion there. At the same time, we have, in the last 4 or 5 months, created and launched DX Ventures, which is really a venture arm to invest in products and projects that DXDAO itself needs and thinks other DAOs will also need. But at the same time, and rather than just do investments, there's an idea, and people have been talking about, should it also do things like incubation? And so there's like a high-level post about this idea of expanding DX Ventures into more than just like a investment arm, but also a bigger incubation and an umbrella that teams and projects could come under and be a part of, and really building that out. So that's like in contrast. Those things kind of are in contrast to each other. One is a portion of DXDAO is an incubator and VC investing arm, and one is DXDAO itself becomes this incubator and is led by DXD token. And so I don't know what the answer is that we need to, and then with that, it raises the question of what is DXDAO's identity? And I think that it's not fully clear. As I, like, for example, have been here in Miami telling people about DXDAO, and they're like, well, what is DXDAO? Oh, you're a DAO, like a DAO first. DAO, you've been a DAO for a long time. You practice decentralized governance. But like, what do you do? What's your mission? And like what we say so far is kind of like we build DeFi products, right? But like that's pretty general still, because DeFi is now quite general, and so there's more. You get more specific, like Badger DAO. Yeah, they build DeFi products too, but their goal is to like bring BTC related products and tools and capital to the Ethereum space, right? And Yearn is very simply to seek out the highest like risk adjusted yields for its users. And then Index Co-op is to like bring unique new indices to like different parts of the ecosystem that make things like easier for people to invest in the things they want or something like that, right? So those are like more specific identities, and I was wondering if people had any ideas around DXDAO and its identity and how that fits in with like incubating or becoming an incubator.
Hey guys. So like I wouldn't want to kind of like force my opinion on any of this, right? Since I'm not a full-time contributor. Just like sharing my opinion from the outside. And I think DXDAO actually like fits very well with the incubation angle, just because we are already kind of like developing so many products. And that is kind of like why for me, it was kind of like always a given, that eventually, after we had like our first few products kind of like developed, we would basically, make this like a full-time practice, kind of like really spinning out new products, kind of like finding entrepreneurs and basically becoming an incubator. But I agree with you. Like culturally, we probably like we would have to make a decision here soon.
Christopher, what do you like when you explain DXDAO to people? And they're like, well, what does DXDAO do? How do you explain it? Like build DeFi products? I
always thought of it as an incubator, always, yeah. And so, but like I always framed it as like an incubator in its very early stages. That is like still figuring out how it can best help projects succeed. And from there on, before they going to make like a bigger outreach to other projects, or like basically to other entrepreneurs to launch their projects under the DXDAO umbrella, DXDAO is still kind of like in a phase where it's like learning about how it can best support projects.
And do you see, as a DXD holder, do you see that mission of like DXD capturing value from that whole experience by getting a portion of any and all the projects that it does help launch and incubate? It just, the way it brings value back is not full ownership, but only like a partial ownership?
Yeah, this is 100% exactly the reason why we invested. So we definitely see that there's going to be like a decentralized incubation powerhouse. It has like so many advantages over like centralized incubation. And from that perspective, we always kind of like invested with that in mind. And I also think you can only like make sustainably like really good returns, you know, when you have like a relatively, you know, like when you own like 10% of a network. I mean, that's still a lot, right? 10% of a network, right? We're talking about networks here. And from that perspective, I think you can still make a lot of money just with 10%.
And I think a lot of the points that, Christopher, you made in your post are just generally good points, right? Like about like finding, sharpening the perspective on the market that the products are trying to fit and having independence in that way. I think if we look at the current state, like these products are like homegrown essentially, and the fees they generate like belong to DXD. But in terms of like to what extent should that be distributed, or like what percentage does DXD have to retain to like have a meaningful stake, right? Like I don't think it's a given, right? I think like over time, like if you look at say Omen and Omen token or Omen product token, maybe the initial distribution is like 30% goes out to growing the community, but that doesn't preclude like that from changing over time, depending on what seems to be like the best growth strategy. And so when I think about, what about this incubation approach and attracting other, especially like new like teams that have maybe already kind of formed an initial founding team, right? Like they're not necessarily gonna, if you want to attract those types of people to DXDAO, they're not going to like fit into the existing system of like, well, these are sort of homegrown projects where people were working for DXDAO and then kind of ended up on a project. Like these, if they're already independent teams, they're going to want to retain some kind of control and ownership. And I think it's interesting to be able to attract that kind of a team into the DXDAO ecosystem. And like, I agree with your perspective, Christopher, that like, that's an exciting kind of decentralized incubators, like this exciting idea. And I'm kind of just like wondering like why couldn't both work, right? Like you have a spectrum essentially where, on one end, maybe DXDAO is giving out grants like it's done to El Manit. On the other end, you have like completely homegrown products like Swapper, where the team was basically formed within DXDAO. Or you have something kind of in between where there's independent teams that take some investment from the DAO and rely on some of DXDAO's infrastructure, like the marketing and communications, like human resources, etc., like the ability to do things in a fully decentralized way. Like, could we have basically a spectrum of how this works and kind of like support people at different points along that spectrum?
I mean, yeah, I mean, of course, I can't say right that it's not going to work. I would just like say that any really good project would likely need a lot of kind of like autonomy and independence, especially like around product decision. And I'm not sure like if DXDAO or like rep holders would be able to grant that, because in the end, like every DXD rep holder is another chef in the kitchen.
I would disagree. Like this, I'm not like we didn't had a project which we actually incubated. So I'm not sure how the DXDAO should will proceed with like incubating, but I think yeah, like the question is, should we already like prepare how we deal with incubation, right? Like we didn't incubate Omen, we didn't incubate Swapper, it was built in-house. And I think it's worthwhile thinking about how to present DXR as an incubator, because we didn't do it yet. And I think it could be worthwhile to like think about how we actually communicate that we want to be an incubator. And then I think the big signal should be that we want sovereign teams to be incubated. And I think the DXR would be fine in like holding 10% of the tokens maximum in exchange for sovereign teams doing what they want.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of like, I see it like similar to, as an equivalent to company builders in a traditional world, where basically, they have money, they have resources, they set out, they research like a certain area, and then they basically look for entrepreneurs and residents to basically build out these individual ideas. Then they take, then they take like, I don't know, like 10 to 20% cut of the equity. And so like from their perspective, like instead of an incubator, right, maybe it makes more sense if we kind of like call ourselves like a network builder, or like I don't know, like a sort of a company builder, like a project builder. I mean, that's totally doable as well. But my ultimate point is that projects will need a lot of like independence ultimately to succeed. And yeah, that's I guess that's my biggest point.
So, sorry, I just had a question or comment as well. Okay, so like the differentiating factor that like both Geronimo and I think John kind of mentioned were the idea of, these teams kind of growing organically within DXDAO. And it's always been kind of a discussion. I think we mentioned this last week about like the idea of like fractalization and creating guilds, and then essentially having the technologists, along with the other community members kind of govern the guilds. So in that way, it is more focused, clean, like effort as far as decision makers, as far as like who's really making decisions regarding the products. I guess that's kind of, in a way, I feel like it sounds like we're talking about different things, but maybe we all are on the same page, because that's the direction we're intending to go with the products anyways at this moment. And then I think maybe it would be, as we're all kind of saying, a different structure if someone's really coming in with a team completely separate from DXDAO as far as autonomy and, clear kind of differentiations about like governance and things like that for that product going forward and ownership. Does that sound right? Or is there something about Omen and Swapper that need more autonomy aside from the guild?
Well, I mean, I think like the autonomy starts kind of like with a token distribution, right? So if the guild itself, doesn't really have like a large supply of tokens that they can basically like decide over what they want to do, then I would question kind of like how much autonomy they actually have, right? So if I would basically run a project, right, where there's like another organization that owns 70% of my supply, I would basically go for like every product decision to that organization to basically like confirm, hey, can we do this? Like, is this okay with you? Or are you going to dump our tokens afterwards? Or like, are you going to be unhappy about it afterwards? And so like, I think like real autonomy has to start with like a really also kind of like somewhat decentralized cap table.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I guess the fact that the Omen team decided to have this like bigger, not really like sending 70% to the DXDAO is already a signal that the Omen team wants to be very close to the DXDAO. Yeah, I know, like the reason why we actually choose to do that is mainly because the guilds are not proven yet, and we wanted to like kind of bootstrap the guild with especially like the Omen guilds by not dropping like a lot of tokens to the guild first, keeping them at the DXDAO as like a security measure, and then over time, the guild, as far as I see it, can always like request or like propose to like get tokens from the DXDAO if needed. Right, but like I think we should come up with like a framework for incubating projects with a clear signal that there is no like DXDAO will hold most of the coins. Like that was just like projects built in-house, but I think we should do both, right? Like signaling that there's like a very a network building up where you can do like very strong in-house and like with joint venture of the DXDAO. I'm not even sure if we will see. Yeah, I'm very skeptical that the incubator approach will go this like greedy path of like 70%. Never ever. This was just like a Omen swapper specific.
I could also see like Omen and Swapper on like a more gradual path towards like, you know, like full independence, while also making or like setting up a framework to attract new teams where they are more independent from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I
Chris,
think,
like, I think there needs to be definitely. I think the reason why we don't have this like incubator framework is because no one is like looking into it and takes care of it, right? And I think that is something we should probably put a more focus on, especially like Chris was signaling that the DXDAO has like a lot of potential of being an incubator, and that means if there are people interested in like transforming DXDAO as like a proper incubator with like a clear framework for sovereign teams wanting to like use the DXDAO in exchange for like some token swap or whatever. Yeah, I think there could be a team forming for making sure that the DXDAO is preparing a framework.
yeah, I mean, I would just also kind of like highlight that then actual like the we are not too far apart, right? So you're basically saying, you know, DXDAO is just holding onto the 70% of the token, you know, until like the guild has like more or less like proven itself, right? And we already have that, like with every kind of project, right? So I mean, granted, like the individual projects, they have like much more independence there, but I can, for example, remember there was also like this one project very early on in 2016, I think was called 10x. And that was like one of their investors that was like basically holding on to like, I think like 50% of the token supply or something like that, but only under like a fiduciary duty. So they yeah, exactly, like the car company from Singapore. And they had like this one investor, Fenbushi, which basically held onto like 50% of the tokens as a fiduciary duty, and they couldn't sell that, right? But they also like said, okay, like the team has made like really terrible progress, so we're not going to release the remaining tokens to them. And I see this like similar, right? So like DXDAO, you know, we could basically say, okay, 10 to 20%, or I don't know, something like that, we have to decide we will keep forever, and the remaining we just hold, you know, like in a separate contract under like a fiduciary duty, kind of like you know, before we release them to the team. We could also like say, you know, like they're vesting over like a pretty long time, etc.
So it sounds like we're actually all on the same page. It's just a matter of like framing the how we're holding the tokens and where they're being held and for what reason, because this was kind of initially discussed as how the tokens, even the ones that DXDAO was holding, was supposed to be over time, and this is years, used for other liquidity rewards programs, other community building programs, other partnerships. But it would make a lot of sense to just do something as far as like a vesting contract with the tokens, and they either go to the guild or to DXD holders. We can discuss those specifics, but that might make a lot of sense, and we can kind of phrase it like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't have any issue with setting up a vesting contract to the guilds, like, but it should be a little bit longer term, like maybe cliff after, like the vesting should start in potentially 2 or 4 years, something around that, because the guild will have a lot of Omen tokens, right?
And the main reason I see for the large percentage being retained by DXDAO is that that's how it stays with DXD essentially, right? Because I think for these products, Omen, Swapper, and Mesa, like they were either already in existence or like about to be launched when DXD was launched, right? And I think the expectation, at least as I see it, for DXT holders would be that like it's their products, and if you take 80% of the token supply and like hand it to something that like is not benefiting DXT, that sort of seems like we'd be, yeah.
We might be making that assumption like without maybe too early, because Christopher is a giant DXT, a big DXT holder, and he not only didn't expect that, or he's actually saying it should be different, like right?
So, but like I mean, because if you have this vision that it's an incubator and this is the model, like I understand what Christopher's saying. Yeah, I'm wondering though, would all of the DXT holders agree with that or not? Like, I mean, personally, yeah. I see it more as like these products belong to DXT right now.
Even, I mean, again, we're talking about these things on the forum, and I asked that question because I was curious what other DXT holders have thought, because it has always been our perception that they would feel it would be very problematic to have it structured any other way. And then there's also the question of, do we actually need to, even if we set up the vesting contract, dependent on how long the cliff is, all of those factors, but we could still, regardless, do some sort of fee allocation that the guild votes on to DXD holders as well, or even partially allocate more tokens to DXD holders through a vesting period as well, if we're going to vest to the guild as well. Just different options.
In my view, the way it's presented at the moment is just words. It's not a smart contract. It's not code. It's not law. It hasn't been ratified, and that's what brings ambiguity. And there are a lot of blurred lines. And we not only don't know what the current situation is, let alone try and figure out what if something else. So if Chris wants to present an idea, it would be ideal to do it more thoroughly. Start with painting a picture of what it is right now and show the steps to changing it, because at the moment it's quite blurry. You know, we're trying to figure out what is DXDAO, where are we headed, and we're just faced with this proposal for a transition to a different model, and it's difficult to even figure out and picture how this is going to happen. So it's a lot of words, but how is it actually going to happen step by step? If someone does a thorough proposal with all of the steps lined out clearly, it will be easier to make a decision like that, because at the moment it's unclear how it's going to happen.
What if, so I understand like the main problem, Christopher explained, is that like this autonomy is like feeling like you can make your own decisions without like having to go to somebody else who actually owns the thing, right? What if the 70% was like jointly held by DXD and like the rest of the Omen token holders, such that like basically the DXD holders couldn't spend those tokens, couldn't dump them, right? Without the consent of like the Omen token holders, and vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is also, that it impacts the flexibility of the guild itself, in my opinion, in kind of like attracting outside contributors, right? Because they have like much less tokens. They can actually like used to either incentivize usage, but also to kind of like eventually sell to outside contributors or reward them for, I don't know, like work that they do for Omen.
Yeah, we have right. So the allocation that we currently have for like future Omen Squad is basically what you're saying is maybe not attractive enough in the long term, but that could be remediated by a larger guild allocation that could then be based on success voted on the guild to distribute to future team members and things like that.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, the thing is, right, I don't want to take like too much lead here because I don't want to push DXD into like a certain direction, right, which the members don't really like agree with as a whole. So I can, I can like share my perspective. I can share my opinions. I can provide like a nudge into like a certain direction, but I don't think it would be right if I would push this like any further in this. I mean, I can definitely help. Once you've decided like a direction, I'm happy to help, but I kind of like feel I shouldn't push like any specific direction any further.
Well, I sure feel like the most interesting thing would be to attract an outside team, like to kind of demonstrate this, right? Under a new model. Like I think like having a good example of like how this could work, I think would be the best way to, I think it's something that Nylon likes to say that DXDAO basically runs on initiative, right? And I think rather than retrofitting Omen or Swapper into this idea of a model, like it would be more powerful if we can actually find like a new team and work and like establish it under this model.
Yeah, I would agree, but I think we would need to change like a few things to actually be able to really help them, right? We would really need to find someone who is in charge. I think we would need to put like a couple of people in place who are like in charge of like a certain area. That's kind of like my opinion, right? But I'm not sure like if that is like something that DXDAO would agree with. So we would kind of like need something like a CTO, right? Where kind of like a new project that maybe wants to, get incubated by DXDAO can go to and can basically like ask, okay, like how do we do this on a technical level? Can you give us some resources? At the same time, right, kind of like something like a CMO, basically like asking, okay, like how do we approach marketing? Like what should we do? Like how can you help us? And the same thing for like product, hiring, audits, etc. Right. So we have like specific groups of like expertise already within DXDAO, and I think just making them available for like outside projects, I think that's really the big value that we can add. In a similar way, as we currently like shift resources around to basically get Omen, Swapper, or Mesa over the finish line.
Yeah, that could be interesting. I mean, I think one of the reasons we don't like titles is I don't think people should be like resting on their title, right? They should be earning and showing what their responsibilities are, but having those resources available to teams and people who are like, coordinating those resources makes sense to me. And I think we already have like a nascent structure of this sort. But
yeah, exactly. This is exactly why for me, DXDAO was already always, some form of like an incubator.
So there's not many projects to compare this to, but you could compare this to OneHive. So like a team who is in the OneHive ecosystem, which is a way less formal DAO than DXDAO, Agave, there's a team, they want to build this product. They get the support, they get the community, they give tokens to the honey holders. Like they connect themselves to the OneHive community, but they're building the product and it's going well, but they don't necessarily like, it's not an incubator, but it's a community. Basically it's joining and building within a community. Setting up like an incubator, like an official incubator, which companies and things have done for many, many years, is a very structured thing, but allowing a community to join is is something that's easier, I think, or to join the community. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of like have to think about the overhead, you know, like a new community. They have like all different expectations. And I don't know, like I think we are already like relatively slow in our decision making, and just like onboarding new communities might impact that even further. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're talking about One Habits, they have a very loose model where it's maybe easy to onboard new communities because there's really no structure or even expectations, right? They do like set something up at the beginning, maybe with some tokens, and then they're almost independent. Like I could picture something that is, you know, maybe as flexible and fast, but DXi just is supporting with these like, you know, areas of, like if you're a new entrepreneur and you're like, I need to set up a company, there's all these things that are like difficult to crack, right? And you have enough to do just on the product itself, and without having to worry about communication and distribution and auditing and, you know, including
How
all
does
this.
that fit in if these incoming project teams like are setting up companies? They're setting up legal entities and companies. How is DXDAO going to interact with those and have them part of its ecosystem? Do you have to be willing to build under the DXDAO framework, like no company?
Isn't there?
Yeah, I think that's something there. Go ahead, Christopher.
Isn't there like a legal framework for DAOs in like, I don't know, Wyoming or something like that?
It's just a fancy LLC. What Wyoming has, we could form. There's so many different types of formations that we could do. If we pursue this route, it would be something that we would need to consider more thoroughly if we're going to be doing like routine investments and things like that, like to a large degree through incubation. It would be something that we would need to provide a little bit more structure for. And we have a lot of options because we're extremely decentralized, Switzerland even, or the United States. Yeah, so it's not actually that hard to execute. It's just, of course, like we've mentioned, deciding which direction we want to go. So doable, but it depends if the community wants to do that.
Yeah, got it. I think we would probably need this, right, if we would go like the incubation route, because an equity structure still makes a lot of sense in the early stages for a lot of projects. And yeah, we would probably need like the legal protection from the legacy system, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's still sort of a question, right? Like, how does DXDAO hold a stake in a company that has a traditional like equity structure, that has investors that are acquiring equity?
Yeah, I mean, you could always kind of like try to form a foundation somewhere. I think that would probably be most in line with like the purpose of a DAO.
Yeah, that would probably be the first option for us to look at and move from there. Like we would still, I think, try to do everything as like on-chain, Ethereum, Web3 based as possible. As far as like token swaps and things like that, I think that would be the preference. But especially for nascent stage incubation, there would likely need to be some more formalized structure.
Don't most investors in this space feel comfortable acquiring tokens at this point without necessarily having to deal with an equity structure?
I think that's a really good question for Christopher, actually. I mean, I think us as a DAO would have no problem with that. It's more so the recipient receiving funds from a there's just a lot of AML and other requirements that come into play when you don't have a legal entity attached to it that don't have anything to do with the contract itself or like the agreement of investment.
So sorry, can you like can you ask the question again?
The question was just, do you have any preference of tokens versus some sort of traditional equity when you are investing in DeFi or other projects?
Yeah, well, I mean, we definitely prefer tokens. It's just like so much easier. like no, like 50-page contracts that we have to review. No, like stupid, like lawyer back and forth. I mean, I hope no lawyers are on the call here.
Tammy is a lawyer.
But I'm laughing, so it's okay.
I'm sorry. But I didn't mean it like in a bad way, right? But we definitely prefer pure token based. The thing is, at very early stages, right, it doesn't really make sense for like a project to kind of like force this right away, and also like under security assumptions as well.
Yeah, so I think we would have a similar approach. Like we would prefer to do the token swap, but it's more just the recipient sometimes like wants to form a corporation or form a company or have some sort of potential for a legal entity, and they might need to like track where the money's that they're receiving for investment, where it's coming from and stuff like that, which has nothing to do with the 50-page contract. It's more just like a transactional question.
I wonder if we could flip that around so that they don't, so that the company, the projects don't need to worry about like the fundraising or holding of the, where we do it in a more decentralized way, and they can still have control of however many tokens for the project, but the DXDAO infrastructure kind of handles the rest of it.
The main thing is our products work because there was a DAO and now they're owned by a DAO. The minute you bring in a team of 3 people that owns the product and they want to own the product, the whole product, and then give out 10% like a company, like a startup, there's no longer a DAO owning the product. So if a DAO doesn't own the product, it's very different than what DXDAO does. I don't know if you can actually put the two things together.
Yeah, I see an issue there as well because we were so focused on decentralization. It's kind of like a tenet of joining and participating in our incubation process. So it's like, what does that look like, and how? I mean, obviously, usually the way this works is there's some sort of like genesis or launch of the project of the protocol, and then it's taken care of by the community. So there's that whole dialogue of how and usually there's a foundation, and then the protocol itself is governed by some sort of token, right?
Well, I think like maybe one way to remedy would be, I mean, like number one, right? Projects need or like an equity structure initially makes sense because it allows projects to kind of like get a bank account to basically like pay for, like their, I don't know, like the bills that they have to pay. And number two, basically like for IP protection reasons, right? So, I mean, not that you want to protect your IP by yourself, right? But your investors basically need like some assurances, right? That you're not just going to, launch this and like not give like your investors like any share of it. And I think like from that perspective, right, we could basically say, okay, we could actually like launch a token, pay them kind of like, I don't know, like in USDC or whatever stablecoin that is basically like relatively easy to convert to fiat, but we make the token more or less like non-transferable, and it cannot be sold to like the public. And thereby, we could still basically, I don't know, like somewhat mimic, like very illiquid equity structures as you have like in very early stage startups. And at the same time, basically prevent, that the SEC would come after anyone because they sold securities.
Right, like I feel like it should be possible. I mean, we have programmable finance, right? Like we can basically do anything. And so it's really just a matter of fitting it into the frameworks that you want to play in and what the other parties are like comfortable with.
Sounds like a job for Tammy, to figure this out.
It's a fun problem, actually. We've already been discussing it a bit, like the idea of a restricted token and then like some sort of like vesting mechanism upon like some sort of like if and then structure. So yeah, it's the main issue isn't really. I think we can figure out like whatever the parties want as far as control and paying the bills and questions of like partnerships and how that works in a decentralized world. It gets a little bit more complicated, but it's more so just the transactional elements of receiving money from a DAO. But we're working that out on an entirely separate issue. So I don't think we should have these problems for too much longer.
Yeah, and this question of like how does the decentralized like internet native, blockchain native world like actually interface with the traditional, government controlled world is, I think, something that's going to be playing out over the next so many years. Should be interesting.
Cool. So we can currently move forward like with some of these opportunities. If we find teams and things, we can do it currently through DX Ventures already, like with tokens. And you don't need to answer these questions yet, but then longer term, we need to answer these deeper questions, I think. So, and we're running top of the hour right now, but the last important thing was currently Alchemy is like doing proposals on Alchemy is not really working. Like text is not showing up. There are ways to do see the details of it. Like I think John knows, like through Block Scout or like in the text fields. But right now we are not really putting up new proposals because you just see this like blank proposal, and you can then go in and figure out what it's going to do. And at some point, if this continues to be a problem, we may need to like push some proposals through in that manner. DAOstack is looking at how to solve this issue. It might be a graph issue, it might be something, but we currently don't have a great plan for, or like what expectations are for, like, should we just kind of wait until maybe it gets fixed, or at what point and how many days do we wait before we start doing it in another way?
Yeah, so I mean, the issue is the description and the title fields are not being displayed in the UI. They're still being posted to IPFS, and by the way, this is not like, this is bad because it's kind of like crippling our governance system. It's not a security concern because we already have like the monitoring in place that is like not dependent on Alchemy at all. Because I mean, you can have problems like with this in Alchemy, and that's why we are geared towards that. But I would say like it's obviously it's a big problem because people just, your average voter can't see the title and the description field, right? So I would say in general we should probably try to like go into a holding pattern until they fix it. Like we re-ping them this morning. Ben from DAOstack is re-indexing the subgraph, which seems like a likely culprit here, and so hopefully it will get fixed in the next day or two. If it doesn't, then I think we're going to look at like how we can like work around this. But I would recommend that for now, basically just hold off on proposals until hopefully it's fixed in a couple of days. Unless it's something that's like super important, we could still do the proposal. I think it's just going to require people to take more technical steps to actually understand the proposal, like running it through Tenderly and checking IPFS for the description. Like we could assist people basically through the chat channels and like pointing them to what the proposal actually is. But I think in general, it's sort of not a great thing because it's going to be a pain in the butt. So I would say hold off unless it's something really important.
Yeah. Well, we have a whole timing around swapper launch, farming launch, funding open markets, paying ECC, like we have all these things that now are in holding pattern that parts of them are already moving, but we need more. We need the ability to do proposals, I guess, is what it comes down to. So we can wait a few more days. I mean, max a few more days, but then we really need to figure it out. There's the real layer issue is also a pretty big issue where there's a concern that like anytime DXDAO needs to do a proposal now, a funding proposal for like anything, you name it, like pay for a service, pay for a ticket, fund something, send money to some place, you can't just like do the proposal, because if it's a smart contract wallet, which most people that are receiving money from a DAO to like a project or like an investment or anything, most of those are going to be smart contract wallets, like Gnosis Safe or something, right? And you can't actually do proposals to send money to smart contract wallets. So we can no longer use Alchemy in the way that we've always used it, where you just openly do proposals and it becomes, and anyone can do these things. Like that payment mechanism no longer works. You have to have like a custom relayer for every time you want to make that payment, and that is even for people getting paid. Like even workers, if workers were getting paid on mainnet to a Gnosis Safe, that doesn't work, right? So
so the problem is there's a legacy transfer function in the DAO stack, like core to like contracts. It's called Arc, not Alchemy is the front end. Arc is the contracts. And so with the Perlin hard fork, things like certain things got more expensive, and basically there's like it's a gas limit, right? So if there's a smart contract receiving the funds and that smart contract is doing like non-standard things, like a lot of them do, with the fallback function, it becomes more expensive and the transfer just won't work because there's this hard-coded limit. So like we can always send to like EOAs, like externally owned accounts, and we can build relayers to send to Gnosis Safes. It's only been, how many cases of this do we have being a problem? Obviously there's a problem for the dev multisig. And now it's a problem for Omen Squad. Are there other
Dev multisig, Omen Squad making a payment to ECC?
So wait, but ECC I thought had an EOA that they wanted us to send to. It wasn't I think Augusto looked at it, right? It was an EOA, not a smart contract.
Well, so is that the answer every time before a person does a proposal? You need to like figure out if it's an EOA.
So the bigger goal here is a new governance system, right? And that's like is much more than just this thing getting fixed and that, right? That's like the long-term goal. But like in terms of like how we deal with the current system that we have, like an EOA would work, a relayer being deployed would work. I would say if the number of cases are like a handful, we just deploy relayers each time, right? If it starts to be like, oh, there's a dozen people with smart contracts that we need to pay, and then we can do something more robust, which would be like a flexible relayer that can actually like take parameters and stuff, and something like that we could potentially do.
Okay. Yeah. All right. It's just something to keep in mind, and it really. What is supposed to be an open governance system, like the fact that anyone can propose stuff, it introduces an obstacle that makes it takes away like the ability for most people to actually use it, right? Like especially if you
I don't know if most people is right. Like I mean, certain smart contracts can't receive funds, but yeah, it's definitely a limitation, and it's less far from ideal. Yeah, and
like DXDAO turning more and more into Bitcoin by being less usable and less usable. I mean, no one could predict that the upgrade, which went live for Ethereum, kind of breaks the system, which we kind of inherited. But I think the guild approach could be also like longer term a solution for a replacement for the legacy system we are using right now.
Governance 2.0 will not use the legacy transfer, sorry, I'll tell you that. It will get fixed eventually, but I think in the meantime we have to deal with it. Yeah.
Cool. And so like Venky's asking like around Omen and Swapper token launch, like do we know how? We don't know what the delays are, so we're having trouble planning timing and dates around things because of governance delays. So it's just, I guess it's just play it by ear for now, right? Yeah, okay. All right. Cool. Thanks everyone for coming. I think there's another call coming up in 20 minutes, but yeah, have a great day.
Everyone.
Thanks, guys.